Given the way things went on last weekend's road trip, I would hazard a guess that the Laval Rocket are probably happy to be home this week. If you could sum up last week's road trip for the Laval Rocket, I think you could probably do it in 3 words. It wasn't pretty. They were on the road for 2 games last week, and we are going to get you up to date on this video with what happened in those 2 games in our Rocket Rewind. We're then going to head over to the prospect breakdown and kind of shine a spotlight on the prospects for the Canadiens who are playing for the Laval Rocket. I'll pick out my standout star from the prospects for the week, and then we'll get a Laval look ahead at what's on the schedule this week. The Rocket kicked off their road trip on Friday night with a visit to Rochester. Yes, they have played the Rochester Americans quite a bit in the last 2 or 3 weeks, but this was the first time they were playing them in Rochester's home barn. And if you saw last week's video, you'll remember when I previewed this game against the Rochester Americans, I said this. Playing against the Rochester Americans for the Laval Rocket has been kind of a hit or miss. There are some games that Rochester absolutely has their number, and there are some games that Laval is able to really take control of things and dominate the game. So, which version of the Rochester Americans and which version of the Laval Rocket showed up? Well, the Amerks absolutely flipped the script on Laval in this game. Instead of it being Joshua Waugh scoring a hat trick, and instead of it being Laval putting up 8 goals on the night, it was the other way around. It was the Amerks and Mason Jobst who scored a hat trick in his home barn. They didn't quite get to 8 goals, but they got awfully close, beating the Laval Rocket 7-4 in this one. It was actually relatively close for the first 2 periods, more like the 2 teams were exchanging goals once they evened things up. They were exchanging goals, kind of kept it a little bit close, but then Rochester really broke it open in the 3rd period, and quite frankly, penalties were again an issue with the Rocket not playing enough 5-on-5, which is more their strong suit. So it was a disappointing loss, particularly since they had lost on the road in Belleville the week prior, on Saturday the week prior, and Laval was still hunting that first road win of the season. Would they get it on Saturday night? Last week I did mention that Saturday night would not be an easy task. The Syracuse Crunch's home barn, which is now called the Upstate Medical University Arena in Syracuse, New York, is a pretty hostile environment for the Laval Rocket. The fans there are passionate about their team, and they know that Syracuse and Laval don't like each other very much. And you add some more things to the equation. This was former Laval head coach Joël Bouchard's first time behind the bench of his new team, the Syracuse Crunch, playing against his former team, the Laval Rocket. So what was it going to be like for the Laval Rocket? Well, oh boy, they'd probably like to forget this game. They got shut out in this one, and it wasn't a close one. It wasn't one of those shutouts where, they lost 1-0, 2-0, not even 3-0. This was a complete walloping, 5-0. I'm sure Bouchard was pleased about that. I'm sure JF Uhl was not pleased about the performance from his bench. Again, the discipline just not there. The goaltending was particularly weak on this night. The defense, the turnovers have just piled up and piled up and piled up. In fact, JF Uhl after the game spoke about how practices this coming week are going to start getting tougher, that there's a lot of things that need to change. The effort isn't being made, and those habits start in practice. So I imagine, although the Laval Rocket are probably relieved to be back home and off the road, they're not going to have an easy time of things this week as they prepare for a 3-game homestand. It also doesn't help things that additional injuries and recalls took place this week. Gabriel Bork, we know that he's been out for about a week or so. Well, now we know how long he's going to be out. He needed to have surgery, and he's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks that the Laval Rocket will be without their captain, as well as Brady Keeper. Defenseman Brady Keeper is also out of the lineup for an undetermined amount of time with an injury as well. On the back end, Gustav Lindstrom was recalled to Montreal once David Savard went down with an injury. And so that required JF Uhl to at least make one recall from the Trois-Rivières Lions, and that was you could say forward and defenseman John Parker-Jones, who spent some time with Laval last year as well, and he was recalled from Trois-Rivières. He did not play on Friday, but he did play on Saturday. And if we're speaking about the lineups, well, let's take a look at what those lineups look like. Without having basically any forwards that are healthy scratched anymore, because he's got so many forwards that are injured or recalled. Really, the only thing that can change in the forwards is where they are deployed. You'll see night to night that at least the Joshua Waugh, Lucas Condata, Sean Farrell line, that second line, stays consistent from night to night. And on the top line, it's always Mitchell Stevens at center, always Lias Andersson on the right-hand side. On Friday night, it was Xavier Simoneau on the top line on the left wing. Saturday night, that changed to Brandon Gignac. Neither combination really sparked anything. And the only other real change was down on the fourth line. Friday night, Mishak was still over on the left wing, but Saturday night, he did get to move back over to center. However, he's got Riley McKay on one side of him and John Parker-Jones, who can play both forward and defense. Well, they put him on forward, taking Riley Kidney out of the lineup. So a prospect comes out of the lineup and John Parker-Jones comes in for a game. It's unfortunate, I think, that Jan Mishak continues to be kind of buried on that fourth line. The guys that he's usually on a line with are not known to be big producers. And so I think it's hard for that young prospect to really generate much when he's stuck down there. I'd like to see him get at least a shot somewhere on the third line, and maybe even with a more dynamic, it'd be great if Jared Davidson could get healthy and get back in the lineup, because I'd like to see Davidson on Mishak's wing at some point, perhaps on the third line, but we'll have to wait to see how that goes. On the back end, again, things just kind of shuffling around here and there. Jaden Struble, probably the strongest defenseman that Laval has so far this season, has been a steady presence on the top pairing. But William Trudeau demoted down to the third pairing on Saturday night. Logan Mailloux has also been a steady presence on the second pairing. And Matthias Norlander, those three are really the three that are kind of consistently in their places. As far as goaltending, Jakub Dobeš got the start on Friday night, and he actually had, despite the fact that Rochester scored 7 goals, one of them was an empty netter, a couple of them were on the power play, and a couple of them were deflections that he couldn't do anything about. So the score and his stats look worse than they were on Friday night. He actually made some pretty decent saves at some key times during that game. I wasn't actually very disappointed with Jakub Dobeš's performance on Friday night. That night, it was more the team that was in front of him. I can't say that I say the same thing for Strauss-Mann for Saturday night. There was a couple of the early goals that got let in that I thought looked a little soft for Strauss-Mann. There were one or two that there wasn't much he could do about, but there were some that I thought should have been stoppable. The first 2 goals of the game could have been stoppable for Strauss-Mann. So that is how they've lined up over the weekend. We'll see if anybody gets healthy this coming week. As far as the standings, though, that means that the Laval Rocket have started the season now 1-5-1. It puts them last in the North Division, last in the Eastern Conference, and dead last in the AHL. Not the way I think people expected. We knew, kind of hedging things, we knew going into this season that they were going to be one of the younger teams in the AHL, and winning wasn't going to come easily every night. So I really expected them to kind of be middle of the pack, middle to, maybe 3/4 of the way down the pack, at least to start the season. But this has been kind of a bit of a shocking start to the season. Only 1 win so far, 6 losses, and they have not yet won on the road. So we will have to see how that progresses. As far as their special teams, they are 21st in the league on the power play with a 17.1% on the power play success rate. The penalty kill is getting worse. 28th in the league, just 75% on the penalty kill. They are leading in 2 categories. Unfortunately, they are no longer leading in goals for, but they are still leading in the league goals against. They have given up 37 goals against in these 7 games that they have played. Joshua Waugh, of course, still continuing. Not as spectacular of a week for him as he had the prior week, but he's no longer leading the AHL points race, but he is leading the rookies in the AHL in points still with 12 points. So in this week's prospect breakdown, this is where it gets a little hairy, gets a little difficult when the team overall is simply not firing on all cylinders. It gets a little more challenging to pull out the positives, but it's important to continue to do so no matter how small those positives might be, because it's those positives that are going to keep propelling the development of these prospects in a forward trajectory. So this week, let's start with the bad, and let's just get it out of the way. Discipline has been an issue since the start of the season, and I think that has to come to a stop as soon as JFL is able to drill that into this team. The indiscipline is costing them quite often, particularly now that their penalty kill is down near the bottom of the league in terms of its rating. They need to stay out of the box as much as possible and play 5-on-5, which is where where they perform more strongly. As I mentioned earlier, goaltending also is one of the weaknesses. Back in the summer, I was concerned about how goaltending was shaping up for the Laval Rocket on paper. Jakub Dobeš is the next generation of Canadiens goaltending. He needs plenty of ice time, and he's going to make a ton of mistakes, and that's fine. Transitioning to pro hockey is not an easy one, particularly for a goaltender. So he's going to need a lot of time to learn and make mistakes and grow. And he needs a good mentor to help guide him through all of that. Getting Strauss-Mann, to me, was a little bit of a head scratcher, because Strauss-Mann, he's not in the same position that Jakub Dobeš is, but he's also not an experienced, seasoned veteran that can mentor a young goaltending prospect like Jakub Dobeš. And I think that's part of the issue that we're seeing now, is we've got 2 goaltenders who probably could use the presence of someone who is a bit older. You can recall years ago when Keith Kincaid used to be part of the Rocket. Even last year, Kevin Poulin was there. He's able to provide some mentorship and some guidance and help a young goaltender learn how to be successful at the pro level. And so I'm less concerned about Jakub Dobeš not getting a strong start out of the gate, because he has shown instances, they may be brief, but he's shown instances where the talent is there. He's just got to learn. And this is nothing against Strauss-Mann. I just don't think that he is the right tandem to have with Dobeš in Laval. And I don't know where they go from there to move forward. If perhaps the defense in front of these 2 young goaltenders can get a bit stronger and gel a bit more, then maybe we'll start to see the crease solidify a little bit more, and we can just keep our fingers crossed about that. So what was good in the prospects this week? As I say, Logan Mailloux did struggle defensively. He's been on the ice a lot of times for goals against. However, he does show flashes of some really good work ethic. He is very aggressive on the puck. He's strong along the boards. He sticks up for his teammates. There are definitely things there for him to build on. Jan Mysak, he has been sacrificing the body a lot. I've saw him particularly on this past weekend blocking a lot of shots. He's doing everything that he can. And Matthias Norlinder is also doing that. In fact, On Friday night in Rochester, the Laval Rocket were on the power play. One of Rochester's players got loose in the neutral zone and started to try to make a breakaway. Matthias Norlinder, even though this ended up being a shorthanded goal, it was not for lack of trying on Matthias Norlinder's part. He was literally all over this Rochester skater physically. I'm amazed that he didn't get called for an interference penalty. And I think that's what impressed me, was that he was doing everything physically possible that he could within the rules and without drawing a penalty to prevent this goal from happening, this shorthanded goal against. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. What did Matthias Norlinder do? He turned around and he then scored the first goal for Laval just a couple of minutes later. So he was very strong on defensively on the play, trying to prevent that shorthanded goal against. And when that didn't happen, he turned around and he got a goal for Laval and even the score. So I was very impressed with Matthias Norlinder this week, and that is actually going to make him my standout star for this week for the prospects. He's very much, even though he's not doing, maybe he's not producing, or that his statistics don't necessarily reflect what he would like them to be, he is doing the little things very well, and I think that's very encouraging. So on the Laval look ahead this week, what happens now? Well, JFL promised that things were going to change in practice this week, so we can pretty much bet that there's going to be some intense training sessions for the Laval Rocket this week as they prepare for a 3-game homestand against two teams that they have not played against yet this season. First, on Wednesday night, they welcome in the Utica Comets, that is the AHL affiliate of the New Jersey Devils. They will be in town on Wednesday night, and then a back-to-back series Friday night and Saturday night when the Toronto Marlies come to town for the first time in the regular season this year. This will be a tale of two very different teams. Utica is also struggling to start the season. They are currently 6th in the division, which is just one place above the Laval Rocket. They also only have one win on the season so far. So this is going to be a bit of who has more determination on Wednesday night. It might be a different story, though, for Friday and Saturday night. The Toronto Marlies have a very strong team this year. In fact, they are 2nd in the North Division right now, tied for 3rd in the Eastern Conference, and tied for 6th in the league. They are sitting towards the top of the 32 teams in the AHL. They have a strong team this year. One can hope that perhaps they find a little bit of that home ice advantage magic that they've enjoyed the past few seasons, where even in losing seasons, Laval has performed well on home ice. That hasn't happened yet so far this season. Maybe this is the week that home ice magic kicks in a little bit, which would certainly be helpful against these two opponents. We've got 3 very different programs that we bring you every week here on the Rocket Sports Media YouTube channel. Very news-oriented Laval Rocket prospect update here on Rocket Hockey Report on Tuesdays. More of an analytical look at the Habs on Habs Hockey Report that I host every Thursday. And of course, our long-form Canadiens Connection podcast with Rick Stevens and Michael Spinella that comes out every Monday. And if you're enjoying any and all of our shows here on the YouTube channel and you haven't done so yet, why don't you just take a moment to tap that subscribe button, hit the like button, tap the notification bell so you don't ever miss an episode of any of our video products. And I posed the question a couple of minutes ago of whether or not the goaltending tandem is set up for success in Laval with the personnel that they have in place there. Well, last week on Habs Hockey Report, I talked about the goaltending situation in Montreal. Caden Primo getting his first start of the season, what to do with a 3-goaltender rotation at the NHL level, who's set to be the starter for Montreal, who is emerging as the natural starter. If you happen to miss that episode, well, you definitely want to check that out, and I have a link to it right here. So click that, check it out, and I'll see you again here next week. Thanks for watching.